you please ask the administration and deputations to come in?
Okay. 見完走咗添。好，我哋
Welcome, deputations and government departments, for joining us Today, in this subcommittee on integrated education, we're here to discuss about issues related to the difficulties in implementing integrated education with respect to students with physical disabilities and visual impairment. Of course, those with physical disabilities and those with visual impairments have their respective needs. There are altogether 18 deputations and individuals coming to talk to us about their concerns. Each will have 3 minutes, and I ask you to make good use of your time and not to digress. I will first ask the administration to quickly go through the paper, because we haven't had a discussion in a panel on the paper yet, and then I will ask deputations to speak before I ask members to ask questions. First, Mr. Yeung. Let me quickly go through the paper. Compared with students with other disabilities, we have an early identification of those suffering from impairment and disabilities. Currently, for children between the age of 0 and 5 in the maternal and child health centers, they will go through health assessment and physical examinations to identify possible disabilities, and then their cases will be referred to specialist clinics. In relation to education, the Department of Health, Social Welfare Department, and the Hospital Authority will provide assistance under their respective purview. So in terms of education, we issue regular grants to mainstream schools, and we also provide them with special assistance, say for example the integrated education schemes and the learning support grant and top-up fund. We also have resources to provide barrier-free access and conversion and modification of school facilities, say for example ramps, handrail signage, and visual aid devices. Regular visits will be paid to schools, and they will give advice to resources deployment and effective teaching and learning, and also school parent and government cooperation. After May 1997, in terms of hardware, newly built schools will have already contained ramps, lifts, toilets for persons with disabilities, handrails, and signages in the schools. For schools that are built earlier, we will seize the opportunity for conversion to built-in improvement works to improve the learning environment for students with disabilities. And we also have give support, various support programs for students with visual impairment. Support will be given for students suffering from medium to mild visual impairment. Regular visits will be paid to these schools to provide counseling services, and also advice will be given to such schools to enhance the effectiveness of teaching. We also provide subvention to the Hong Kong Society for the Blind for the operation of the centralized Braille production center that produces Braille reading material for students with visual impairment. We continue to cooperate with professionals in different areas to provide support and assistance to students with special needs. Thank you, Mr. Yeung. Perhaps we will hear from deputations before we ask questions. Let me remind you that what you say is not protected under the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. That means you're responsible for what you say. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Chiu-hung Ka from the First Step Association. The administration's just been talking about primary and secondary schools and other integrated education areas. But what they have neglected is that currently for support, in relation to support and assessments, after the student finishes a secondary school, they all finish. So what about support and assistance given to students of tertiary education and those who need continued education? From what we've heard, there is no such support in these education institutions. Let me give you an example. I have a friend who's wheelchair bound. He cannot come. He told me that most of the tertiary education institutes were built before 1997. So when it comes to facilities like ramps, doors, they are not designed to meet the needs of wheelchair-bound people. Say, for example, there are doors that opens in and out. You have to pull or push to get into the lecture hall. And in a computer laboratory, my friend who's wheelchair-bound cannot even get a proper desk. But you see that even the tables here are the same as those computer tables in Ivy. They are not suitable for wheelchair-bound people. And students went through JUPAs, or they found tertiary education institutes to continue education, but they don't know what support are available for them. There is no information, no leaflets, no information whatsoever in relation to individual faculties or departments as to what support and assistance are available. So students are in the dark. It's only when they have entered that they found that they can't continue to study certain subjects, or certain subjects are simply not suitable for them.
Things are better in special schools because they have the specially designed toilets. But when it comes to tertiary institutions, there's no such support. When the students want to get assistance, when they use the WC, they did not get any. And if they go to school accompanied by their family members, are you telling the family members not to go to work? So there should be more support for the students in a tertiary level. Thank you, Mr. Ip. Mr. Ip was a student studying social studies in Poly U. I met him before, and I think there are lots of room for improvement in Poly U as well. And next, Mrs. Louisa Law from SAHK. SAHK are now running 3 special schools to take care of the needs of students with special educational needs. We have experience in this regard. For the support to mainstream schools admitting SEN is not enough. The extra funding of 15,000 is not enough to address the environment conversion and teachers training and procurement of furniture. So there should be more resource center to give more support to teachers in mainstream schools. And there should be coordination between special and mainstream schools in the same area so that the teachers in mainstream schools can know more about experience learned in the special schools. And the special schools can give advice on the areas I just mentioned. there should also be a partnership between the schools and the rehab service providers so that special cases can be followed up in the long run, and to address the needs of the students at different stages. In enhancing coordination between mainstream and special schools, when the disabled students have to select subjects in special schools, there are many limitations because there is a limit to the subjects opened in special schools. So if there is coordination between mainstream and special schools, then the students can go to the mainstream schools to take lessons. And this will help the students in terms of lifelong education and continuous education, because they can have more interaction with ordinary students. And the mainstream schools can also learn the needs of these as disabled students. Thirdly, in mainstream schools, the teachers and the parents focus on the academic results. And for the students with physical disabilities, SPD cannot fully take part in activities in mainstream schools. Say, for example, in certain lessons, there is not sufficient adjustment on the teacher's part, or the teachers are overprotective of these students. The SPD cannot fully integrate into the curriculum, so there should be more enhancement of teachers and parents' awareness. Can I continue? All right, I want to make one last point. In terms of support in tertiary education level, I hope the Bureau understand that there may not be comprehensive policies in certain tertiary institutions in addressing the needs of the SPD. And at present, in some institutions, the students cannot take a carer with them. So I hope the Bureau can form these policies with these related institutions. Next, Mr. Tam from Hong Kong Red Cross John Kennedy Center Alumni Association. Integrated education is to form a system for students with special needs and SPD to have equal opportunities to learning as ordinary students. For these students, they encounter difficulties, especially in the later stage in education path. There's only 0.3% of disabled students gaining into tertiary institutions. Their needs are not fully addressed, so the essence of integrated education is lost. Wheelchair-bound students in APA saw a lack of ramps on campus, and the school said that the environment could not be changed because of SF fire safety regulations. Now the student got an offer, but the institutions does not give full support to the student. And a student, because of illness, got damages to his brain, but with his perseverance, he got a pass in maths in the last A levels, but the other related subjects, he failed in them, and so he had to enroll in DSE. But at the end, he was advised by the doctor to give up maths, and so he could not get into university. Now, because of his illness, he could not enter university. From the first case, we understand that mainstream school and special schools are different in nature. There may be policies for the students, but in reality, it's a different matter. So the Bureau has to form comprehensive policies. And the second case tells you a student with cerebral palsy cannot take a further step in the education path. for someone who shares similar experience, I hope the Bureau can give equal learning opportunity to disabled students. We suggest that the criteria of entering university should be the result of the relevant subjects only. And there should be interest-free grant in terms of university education for disabled students. And the Education Bureau should address the difficulties encountered by students in learning. Next, Mr. Kwok Chun-on. I'm a university graduate. I'm working now. And there was a time that I wanted to take a master degree program. But for persons with visual impairment, PVI, there are some difficulties in terms of textbooks. Some related organizations are producing special books for us, but it takes time, and it takes time to produce the books and also the audio books. And they target primary and secondary students. For PVI at the tertiary level, we need a lot of support. And there was a time that I had to spend lots of time to scan a book. And I had to make sure that there was no mistakes. This itself was a problem. So I think there should be resources deployed to easy-to-read books for PVI. Especially the PVI in tertiary institutions. Now, for public libraries, there are many electronic resources. But they can't be regarded as barrier-free reading materials for PVI, especially for the PVI studying in tertiary institutions. When it comes to research study, we encounter such problems. So I hope there will be more resources deployed to enhancing the barrier-free reading materials, the electronic materials in public libraries. And I want the government to look at overseas examples for easy-to-read materials for PVI. And there should also be materials for people whose movement are restricted. Will there be more electronic resources, electronic books for people who have reading difficulties? So that's my suggestions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kwok. Mr. Kwong studied business in HKCU, is a graduate of that school. And then Labour Party, Mr. Michael Chang. We have had a number of meetings with deputations. I don't know what information the administration has got so far. Now, in preparing for this meeting, I found that in terms of the individual level, in terms of the family level and education, they encounter various problems. And these problems share something in common. At the end of the day, we have to ask, who is to bear the responsibility, the professionals or the administration, or who? I want to give some examples to you. For example, technical support. The Undersecretary mentioned just now that there are supports for schools to provide facilities to SPD and SVI. Now, for SVI, they have various kinds of problems. For example, there is different levels of vision problem. And so we have to identify the problems to see how we can help them.
I've heard a lot of students with visual impairment complaining to us that in the learning process they need to refer to paper textbooks with a lot of pictures, and they simply can't do the homework, or they'll have to use a lot of time just to understand the question, say for example geometry. And for students with physical disabilities, very often because of their illness they have to go in and out of hospitals, but they don't get sufficient support. And if you may give them enough support at school, but what about personal interaction? How do you ensure that they will have normal interpersonal relationship with other students? Today we're talking about students with physical disabilities and those with visual impairment. But there are students with different disabilities, and they encounter different degrees of social problems. And what about their families? How much knowledge do their parents have to deal with their conditions? They grow up, they encounter different problems in the whole process. There is familial problems, pressure faced by families and parents. What support do you give them? I think it's a systemic problem. What about training for teachers? How much resources does the Bureau provide for research? What about exchange with overseas universities? They have been doing quite well, but we lag behind. I think it boils down to how empathetic the administration is. How do they put themselves in their shoes to try to understand their problems? Next, Mr. Joshua Lee, Civic Party. Sorry, speakers off mic. Today we talk about difficulties faced with these two groups of students. This is our view. When it comes to students with physical disabilities, they encounter difficulties in certain subjects, say for example physical education. The design of the majority of such lessons are not suitable for them. And sometimes when they have physical education lessons, they can only stand aside, or they will simply ask by teachers to write an article about it. But there are a lot of sports that students with physical disabilities can participate. It gives them a chance to exercise. So here is our suggestion. Can the Education Bureau design the curriculum in a way that meets the needs of students with different needs, so that every student can participate and they can actually have a whole person development? And what about quizzes and notebooks? Very often, students with disabilities, they have to ask relevant organizations to turn them into Braille. And it's not like you use Google Translate, it just translates the text from Chinese to English. But if you turn it from text to Braille, it needs proofreading. But very often, teachers don't understand and thought that it would take no time. And there is insufficient time to make preparation. And very often, they don't have the notes with them. If you didn't have enough time, you wouldn't be able to prepare the papers for this meeting. How do you expect students to have the lessons? And sometimes there is, because of insufficient time, they had to resit the test. Extracurricular activities is a luxury to them. But we're talking about whole person development. Students are encouraged to participate in extracurricular activities. But students would like to participate, but schools are worried. Parents are worried. So students are stopped from participating in these activities, and it deprives them of a chance to broaden their horizon. So there is an insufficient number of assistants. If there is sufficient resources, they will help them convert the text to Braille and will also help them participate in extracurricular activities. and teachers know very little about people suffering from visual impairment. Perhaps there can be workshop experience camps to enhance the awareness and the knowledge of teachers. When it comes to integrated education, you know how effective it is. The administration continues to listen to us. Is it the case that we have so many different views that you have to continue to listen to us, or is it the case that you have turned turned deaf ear to us? Well, we ask the administration to provide sufficient support for students so that they can actually learn in a genuine environment for integrated education. Now, Mr. Hansen.
To our concerns.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very relevant to your concerns are the increasing use of compact fluorescent lighting, and LED lighting in schools. The medical profession, real doctors, real medics, real opticians, not propaganda people from the World Wildlife Fund or the light bulb industry, but real medics have concluded that 1 in 30 school children will suffer learning difficulties because of compact fluorescent lighting, and LED lighting. Members of the medical profession are calling for all CFL, LED and fluorescent lighting to be removed from schools immediately and to go back to healthy, incandescent, full spectrum, non-flickering, incandescent lighting. The reason, and this is important, the light produced by incandescent lighting is the same as natural light and it contains no toxins. In contrast, compact fluorescent lighting, LED lighting and fluorescent lighting is completely different. You may be able to see this or may be able not to see this, but natural light, incandescent light, the same light spectrum. You'll note from fluorescent lighting and LED lighting, it's kinked towards the blue spectrum of light. And this blue spectrum of light is incredibly harmful to the eye. So much so.
Dr. Hansen, how is lighting specifically relevant to students with physical or vision disability?
Well, so I'm surprised you're asking the question because people need lighting to be able to read and to be able to see things. And
I mean, in particular to these two types of students.
It's related to people with visual disabilities. As I've said, opticians who deal with visual disabilities are calling for these light bulbs to be removed from schools. They are particularly, these people are qualified in that area. I don't think you are, with greatest respect. But the opticians are calling for these lights to be removed because of physical visual disabilities. I'm going to show you another diagram here. And LED is a laser light. And this is a document by the French government. And it's saying LED light is particularly harmful to children's eyes in schools. What it does to them is it causes eye strain, stress, concentration problems, as well as physical harm to the eye, which results in disruptive behaviour, mental problems. You've got side effect of skin rashes, and in some cases, cancer. Teachers working in schools with fluorescent lighting have a 5 times greater chance of risk from developing cancer. So they are very relevant to visual disabilities in schools. Lighting is an absolute basic necessity. I'm just stunned that you're actually asking the question. Why are you suggesting that lighting is not relevant to visual impairment?
I think lighting is relevant to all of us, but this particular situation we're discussing the concerns for students with visual and physical disabilities in an integrated education environment. I appreciate your expression. I think we've taken your point.
Okay, could you precisely spell out why lighting is not relevant, given that 1 in 30 school children suffer learning problems under CFL, LED and fluorescent lighting? Surely this is relevant.
I think
there are more people with eye problems caused by lighting than in wheelchairs.
Points are well taken. I think your time is up. Thank you. 跟住我哋請
Next is Mr. Alan Chan, Hong Kong Federation of Handicapped Youth. When it comes to integrated education, well, we welcome that. But when it comes to students with physical disabilities, we have the following stance. First, to strengthen teacher training. Teachers is the front line people when it comes to promotion of integrated education. They understand the special needs of students with disabilities. However, in a study commissioned by Equal Opportunities Commission, it shows that 49% of the teachers have never received training related to integrated education. Even if they did, it only amounts to dozens of hours. So for such a short time, it's obviously insufficient to meet the needs of teachers. So the Bureau should provide more in-depth and comprehensive training to teachers so that they can better take care of students with special needs. 2. To improve the barrier-free access in schools. Recently, the administration promotes integrated education. Students with disabilities are studying in mainstream schools. But there is no statistics about the various barrier-free facilities in schools. We urge the administration to collect information of barrier-free facilities and work out an improvement work schedule so that students with disabilities will not lose the chance to study in mainstream schools. And we agree with the Civic Party. Physical education lessons should be specially designed for students with disability because physical exercise is very important to this group of students. We can exercise our muscles to prevent a further shrinking of our muscles, and that should be professional advice sought, say for example advice from physiotherapists to work out a regime that is suitable for students with physical disabilities so that they can also get a chance to exercise. There should be special arrangements for students with disabilities. Some of them may have a lower level of ability to take care of themselves, so they need extra help to learn. So schools should exercise discretion to allow domestic helpers or family members to accompany students at school. In this way, pressure on schools will be allayed, and it also helps students to integrate into education. Everyone should be treated the same. Students with disabilities should be given a chance to receive proper education. Thank you. Next is the Hong Kong Society for the Blind, Ms. Kitty Chung. In 2009, between 2009 and 2011, we have conducted a study with the Hong Kong IED on challenges faced by students with visual impairment. Our target groups are family members of these students and also teachers of these students. The object of the study is to go over the difficulties they encounter and support they need. This is our recommendation. First, to improve the visual aid, computer, and relevant ancillary support. Visual aid and learning aids, yes, they are available at schools but not at home. Support should be given to them so that they don't have to move around these huge devices like magnifiers or braillers or screen readers home, so that they can learn. When it comes to computers or laptops or software and support facilities, it will greatly help students with their disabilities. And when it comes to wear and tear of their equipment, sometimes they have to wait for quite a while for them to be maintained and repaired, and this will delay their learning process. So we ask for the equipment to be loaned to students in need so that there is no gap. And as we've said, there should be a fixed point to provide or loan equipment for students so that there won't be any gap when their equipment break down and they can just learn smoothly without any hindrance. And the latest information can be disseminated from these points. And in relation to adjustments of curriculum and also examination assessment, different schools have a different set of yardsticks. Cooperation between family and schools are very important. We hope that when it comes to training and guidelines, continuous support will be provided to teachers and assistants. There can be a case conference to specially design support curriculums for students, and communication should be enhanced. Last point. We would like to provide support for such students, but students with a visual impairment are scattered over different mainstream schools. We don't have a list. We can't reach out to them. We hope that the Education Bureau can give us a list of schools where there are students with a visual impairment so that we can provide them with timely support.
Mr. Sheng Li Lam, Hong Kong Federation of the Blind. Thank you, Chairman. The Federation thinks that since the implementation of integrated education has been 16 years, so what do we know about the results? The Education Bureau may have a lot in terms of explanation, but what we see is that in 2011 to 12, only 0.3% of disabled students were able to get into universities. US 11%, UK 7%, and Australia 4%. We can't even match Australia's figure. So I'm really tired of the administration's explanation. They keep saying we are adopting a school-based approach. But the fact is, this is a huge problem. There are more and more places at universities, and there are more and more subjects opened up for students in universities. But look at the figure of disabled people getting into university in 2011 and 12. Is it acceptable to us? No, that's why we say we need a full review of integrated education. To do that, we have the following suggestions. Integrated education should be student-based. The different degrees of disabilities should be addressed. And there should not be actions taken only after complaints are lodged, because in that case, we're actually dragging our feet. We are not actually providing equal opportunities in our society. Secondly, we talk about whole school approach in terms of integrated education, but it is indeed a lack of approach. We don't have any case manager in terms of integrated education. We need a case manager to take care of students with special education needs, all the way from kindergarten up to tertiary level. It's only in this way that the disabled students can be fully integrated in education, no matter whether they study locally or overseas. Thirdly, there's something very upsetting about integrated education. Last year, we held a forum on integrated education. Some principals came to experience sharing session. And, well, some outstanding schools asked the senior teachers not to keep the good record because they don't want to attract so many students. So there is no encouragement for the outstanding schools. That's why we think there should be a new post, that is the officer for special education needs. These teachers can also get promoted, and their experience can also be passed on. Thank you. Next, Hong Kong Blind Union, the Trail Walker Vocational and Educational Resource Center, Mr. Ho Ka-sing. Thank you, Chairman. For our resource center, all along we attach great importance to the opportunities to tertiary education of PVI. According to statistics of the Bureau, we understand that more and more of such students can get a place in sub-degree programs and degree programs. It is because of the launching of integrated education, and more of our students get a chance to tertiary education. Now, students thought their learning path is barrier-free, and parents spend lots of money and effort on their children so that their children can enter tertiary institutions. However, at tertiary institutions, it seems there is a lack of support to SVI. I'm going to talk about several examples. In terms of policy, UGC and the Education Bureau doesn't have coordinated policy. Some volunteers help the SVI in their studies in some institutions. These are basic support only, but they're not available in all tertiary institutions. When it comes to textbooks, at the university level, a term amounts to 12 to 14 weeks. But for our students, it's only in midterm that they get a copy of books in the version they need. So their learning is gravely affected. In view of the situation, our resource center urged the UGC and the administration to form clear policy and coordinated policy to give support to SVI in the tertiary level. On the 28th of June, an agreement was signed so that barrier-free version of all books can be passed on around the world. We urge the administration to review and amend the current intellectual property ordinance and related laws so that such books will be available to SVI, and to urge local publishers to offer barrier-free version of their books to SVI. Education, including tertiary education, is there for everyone. I hope the EDB and the related bureaus will consider our views. Thank you. And next, we have Ms. Wong from a concerned group of integrated education for SVI. Thank you, Chairman. We understand that in mainstream schools, our students are encountering many problems, and integrated education does not offer equal learning opportunities. Now, many students and teachers still have some misunderstanding about SVI. Some teachers think these students do not know how to use the computer, they don't know how to clean themselves, and they have difficulties climbing the stairs. This misunderstanding means people undermine the ability of SVI. And the SVI, when they are asked to join extracurricular activities, they are rejected. They are even turned away from home economics, from PE lessons. So they lose learning experience in many areas, and they can't fully integrate into a campus life. These should be addressed via more publicity. There should be more resources given to schools to hold workshops, seminars, and experience sharing sessions so that teachers and students will know more about SVI. Secondly, lack of training for teachers will also in turn pose as problems for SVI. Now, some teachers don't know the learning environment and how the SVI learn, so they can't provide appropriate support. For example, teachers do not read out the words on the blackboard, so the SVI can't follow the lesson, and some teachers do not pass the notes before lessons to the SVI, so the SVI couldn't get hold of the Braille version of teaching materials. Moreover, SVI have to take up 6 subjects at least, but only a small number of teachers have been equipped with training to teach SVI. So in some lessons, the SVI may not get the support they need. To solve all these problems, first of all, there should be more training hours for teachers, and there should also be lesson observation for the teachers. So, for example, the teachers can go to schools where SVI are studying for lesson observation. There should be more teachers receiving relevant training. There should be at least 50% of the teachers in a school who should receive special training to teach SENs, especially the teachers teaching science and mathematics, because SVI need more support in taking such subjects. At last, finally, I hope the administration will take up our suggestions and improve the learning environment for the SVI. Thank you. And Mr. Chang Chen-Yao, Hong Kong Blind Union. Chairman and deputations. Integrated education for persons with visual impairment had its history, and there are challenges ahead for us. For our union, since 1972, we have been fighting for integrated education. And integrated education did not start only after 1997 for us. Actually, it started in 1977. There were suggestions for support in integrated education at that time already. And we should appreciate the most important thing in integrated education is giving an opportunities to the SVI. And if they are given the right opportunities, there are many of them who can make it to tertiary education. So they have the ability that is established. Now I'm going to talk about the improvement. First of all, in terms of subjects, at present, many subjects are not friendly to SVI, for example, home economics, maths, geography. Now, these is because people assume SVI can't handle maps, they don't know how to handle figures. It all boils down to a lack of training and awareness. The SVI, via other means, other senses, they can learn about illustrations. Because of the time constraint, I cannot further elaborate on that. Now, next I want to talk about textbooks. The traditional way of producing Braille version is really slow. The latest way to offer electronic version is very quick. Through Quality Education Fund, we have established that electronic version of textbooks will be very useful to our students, but the administration tell us this can't be done, even though the result has been confirmed by the Quality Education Fund. So the administration is not actually keeping up with time. intellectual property ordinance and the relevant laws that has already been touched upon. I'm not going to repeat that. The problems are there because there is a lack of professionals in the administration in understanding the needs of SVI. Well, as at 1990s, professionals and people working in the government were sent to the UK to learn about the special needs of the SVI. But after 1990s, there was no such thing. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Chen Qinling from the Alliance of Concerned with Integrated Education. I am totally blind. I've been in integrated education for 4 or 5 years. I think integrated education is a good idea. It's regrettable that in terms of implementation, there are 2 major problems. I have personal experience on that. First, lack of resources or mismatch of resources deployed. Well, we need Braille version of the textbooks, but it's only after 2 or 3 months after school year starts that we get hold of the copies. And the worst scenario is that we only get hold of the copies 2 days or 1 day before the exam.
A normal student would not be able to digest everything he's learned in an entire semester, let alone a student with visual impairment. This seriously affects our academic performance and also our interest and incentive to learn. And it's not about our ability, it's a flaw in the system. Second point, we don't have an equal opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities. This point is covered by other deputations. Planners or schools doubt our abilities. They don't understand how much we can do, and very often they are scared that we will have accidents. As a friend of mine requested to participate in a walkathon was turned down. Just now, the intellectual property agreement was endorsed. We hope the administration will introduce legislative amendments so that the lag time for production of Braille versions will be shortened so that we can get a Braille version of textbooks within a very short time, which in turn will help us greatly. Second point, we would like more resources given to schools to engage more teaching assistants when it comes to subjects like physical education, science, maths. If we get assistance from teaching assistants, it will better help us. It will help us learn better. So I hope the administration will set down a clear education policy for us to help us learn and integrate with other students. Next, Mr. Billy Yao. Good afternoon, everyone. I studied in school for the blind in primary school, and then I studied in mainstream school in my secondary school. I have received education. I teach English in the school, and I've received relevant teacher training, and I'd like to share with you my experience. I was shocked because what I experienced a decade ago is still a problem today. Say, for example, Braille books. And students are turned down to take a certain subjects. Say, for example, they would like to sign up for a visit, and teachers say, well, you can't see. How can you participate in our visit? But we don't see with our eyes. We feel. Well, a lot of people spoken about secondary schools, and I'd like to talk about my primary school days. Funding was given. People are paid by an hourly rate to prepare, to scan textbooks, to proofread, to turn them into braille versions for us. But it was a time when just before examination, so we're all very busy. Well, I've been in an immersion program in Australia. The Australian government pays to engage part-time helpers. If helpers can be engaged, not students, but proper part-time helpers, it will greatly help us. In university, well, no one doubted my ability, but I've heard from others that students in social work were asked, well, you can't see your client, how can you be a social worker? These are problems students encounter. Well, I sometimes when I was studying, I talked to my teachers about the difficulties encountered by students with visual impairment, because they didn't really understand. Say, for example, they don't know whether we are able to see the stairs, whether we can see the computer, whether we need someone to read out the examination papers to us. And I hope that after talking to them, they actually learn some more about us. Next is Hong Kong Occupational Therapy Association, Ms. Zane Fong. I've been in occupational therapy for over 2 decades. I've encountered students with different degrees of disabilities, and I've helped them study in mainstream schools. Technology advances. There are many different types of support equipment and technology, so the chance of them entering a mainstream school is higher. The public's acceptability towards students with disabilities have also risen, but does it help in overcoming difficulties they encounter? Well, there are 3 areas: school life, school social life, and also their everyday life. So can they go to toilet themselves? Can they go to the canteen themselves? Then there can be various support equipment. Say, for example, the use of computer. Can they participate in activities during recess? What about physical education? Sometimes all it takes is a small adjustment. These students can participate in physical education. Very often, they are asked to withdraw from extracurricular activities. Well, when it comes to a school life, it requires hand-eye coordination and sufficient motor function. But every student will encounter difficulties. Even students suffering from disabilities, their condition may change. The higher the level the student is in, the school will have higher expectations of them. But students need a drive. Without a drive, then no matter how gifted that student is, they will not be able to excel. Students with physical disabilities and visual impairments face different challenges every day. They have to adapt constantly. And when they are promoted to primary schools, they have to take care of themselves, minor things. And when they're promoted to secondary schools, when they enter adolescence, they have to adapt to changes. Very often they ask us whether they should participate in extracurricular activities. But we need to give them support. Even with individual programs for students, they will have to be tailor-made. Seniors secondary school, students are exploring and learning about themselves. Should they choose subjects that they like, or should they choose subjects that are suitable given their disabilities? Even if they enter universities, they will have to be able to take care of themselves without help, say dormitory life, communications with with others, schoolmates. In a meeting that relates to support to tertiary education students, we have made some suggestions. We're talking about a small number of students, but it doesn't mean that they can't integrate. When integration education legislation is reviewed, IDEA from US, EPA of Australia should be used as reference, so that students with disabilities can grow up just like any other students in the same environment. Thank you. Thank you, deputations and individuals, for speaking. Well, it's unimaginable that some problems still exist after many, many years. There aren't too many views in relation to tertiary education, and UGC representative is not here, but the Education Bureau has the responsibility to reflect the views. Perhaps we need another meeting specially to deal with that. When it comes to students with physical disabilities and visual impairments, basic equipment, say for example scanned books, barrier-free books, and also Braille books are not prepared in time. According to Mr. Chan, they could only get the textbook, the Braille textbook, 2 days before the examination, and that is completely unacceptable. Participation in activities inside and outside schools are seriously insufficient. And I heard from Mrs. Law that they have not fully integrated. Perhaps I will leave some time for the Undersecretary to respond, and then members will ask questions. Mr. Yeung. Once again, I thank you all for telling us the problems and difficulties you face. We've heard some of the issues. From what I've heard, tertiary education is a problem. This issue was touched on in previous meetings, say for example, issues related to students with hearing impairment. Tertiary education institutions are independent in their operation. We give them the resources and they will deal with it. And there may be different assistance given by different institutions. We are in the process of obtaining information from the tertiary education institutions to see what they are doing or what they have planned in relation to assistance given to students with disabilities. We're only talking about 8 tertiary education institutions. We have not yet touched on self-financing education institutions, but it takes time for us to get the information. We'll see if we can maybe perhaps set standards on certain areas or issues. Intake. Compared with overseas countries, the intake rate is on the low side in Hong Kong. We may need more studies to identify areas for improvement. Perhaps there is a lack of support from primary or to secondary level, and they've had a very tough time studying over the years, and adjustments in terms of examination are not do not meet their needs, and we will see what more we can do.
In terms of facilities for Braille books, in the past couple of years, we have asked the special school for the blind and also the centralized Braille production center to compile such books. And we have also asked them to see how we can speed up the production of such books. As far as I know, most of the students with visual impairment can get hold of the books before school year starts. The successful rate is about 95%, but there are some special cases. For example, there is a lack of the printed version of the textbooks, or sometimes the school may change the textbooks they have chosen, or they have changed the priority when it comes to the textbooks used. That's why sometimes the books couldn't reach the students in time. For e-books, we are monitoring the development of e-books, and we're trying to see how we can better help the SVIs with the e-books, so that when it comes to e-learning and e-books, we can also make sure that the needs of SVI will be taken on board. Intellectual property laws that's not within the purview of our bureau, but we can talk to the SFTB. We can talk to the CEDB. Training for teachers is one of our focuses. We understand that to properly implement integrated education without proper training for teachers, we're not going to be successful. But the training is a process that can't be done overnight. And you have to understand teachers have a lot of other tasks. And we are gradually raising the number of teachers to receive this training in each school. And we have also classified the training into basic, advanced, and thematic levels. And we are gradually raising our threshold and standards. And training for new teachers. When new teachers have to undergo training, especially for teaching students with special educational needs. And we also agree that members of the public have to know more about the abilities of SPD and SVI. That is, these students are no different to ordinary students. Now, we need public education, which is also one of the targets of integrated education. Now, through integrated education, students will interact with students with disabilities. So from a young age, they will appreciate the abilities and the strength of students with disabilities. In the coming 2 years, we'll spare more resources in this regard in public education, so that we can enhance development of integrated education. And as I have to say, for the time being, I'm happy to listen to views. All right, I open floor for questions to members. I myself have lots of questions. First, Ms. Claudia Mao. You're the first one. We have sufficient time, 5 minutes for each member, please. Now, I want to say I feel very regrettable that we only have the Under-Secretary here with us. We've been talking about integrated education for years, and we know that for so many years the results not exactly effective. On the tertiary education level, we now know that we're not doing a good job, and it's only now that you gather information of integrated education in tertiary level. I jotted down your words. Well, it's better than nothing. Well, since you propose and you say that you will get the information on the tertiary level, I'll leave you with that. Now, one deputations talk about the subsidies to these students and the funds for these students, and that the schools can make flexible use of the subsidies. And, well, deputation asked to, let me rephrase it, they asked the Bureau to form an independent communications channel with the parents and the schools. Now, we've had so many cases saying that this matter doesn't come under certain purview. Now, it may not be the mistake of the Bureau, but can you go directly to them? My second question. We talked about it before. Visual impairment. Students with visual impairment are discriminated against in DSE. In fact, one of the parents said that the students are asked by the schools not to take certain subjects, saying that they will not do a good job in studying certain subjects. This is unimaginable. Now, these schools are funded by public money, and these schools can't teach students in this way. What's more upsetting is the public letter of SBI. The student only asked for books with larger font size, and he's not given even that. And when he made a complaint, he said that he should count himself lucky since he is in a mainstream school. This is what's said in the letter, in his letter. What sort of integrated education are we talking about? Why don't we just go for a special education? Now, at the beginning, you said that this integrated education is a grand idea. But we now understand that integrated education means that the special schools take in students who can't make it in mainstream schools where integrated education is launched. So, well, can you tell us something, Under-Secretary, just to cheer us up? Under-Secretary. Ms. Mo, has talked about the room for improvement in integrated education. For students with special educational needs, their needs vary, and we have to rely on their teachers and their schools to help them. The Bureau itself can't really follow up on individual students. So integrated education takes a school-based approach. The schools should understand their students and make appropriate adjustment for the students. This is how we implement integrated education. I will not deny that there are certain examples as given by Ms. Mo. Also, we have to monitor the schools concerned. And another issue is communications with the parents. Can I ask my colleagues to talk about the PTA and how we can rally the support of the parents? Ms. Wong, yes. Thank you, Chairman. We encourage parents to reflect the needs of their children to the schools. Now we have the top-up fund, and the schools can make use of that to give funding, say, for example, for purchase of magnifier. So it's up for the schools to make application, but the school may not have time to make such application. If that's the case, then nothing you can do. If we know there are these students in a certain school, we pay regular visit to the school and we encourage the school to make applications on behalf of for these students. And we have received many applications in this fund, and we approve the applications immediately. Recently, I visited a student. He's making use of the CCTV and he has a magnifier with him. He's very skillful in using the equipment and he is only in P5. Will the Bureau set up an independent communication channel to communicate with the parents? We have regular meetings with parents groups, and via the integrated education unit, we listen to their views regularly, and we pay 2 visits every year to the schools, as these are regular visits. Starting from 09 and 10, we know how money is spent on the students with SEN from the report submitted by the schools. Now you talk about regular meetings. What do you mean by that? What sort of meetings? Are they open meetings so that students, parents, and groups can join? Parents groups liaise with us via different channels. We also liaise with academic groups. And there are also parent representatives in our IE unit, Integrated Education Unit. Yes, I remember that. I think Mr. Chong Chen Yao was also one of the members. I don't know who is sitting in there. I think at that time, just 2-3 meetings were held annually. Currently, we have 4 parent representatives. What about contents of the meetings? The meetings are closed. The minutes are uploaded. So the meeting itself is not open. No, not open. We have representatives from school and other relevant groups to facilitate our discussion. The meetings are not open, but the minutes are uploaded to the internet. There's a lack of communication channel, Ms. Mo. I joined some of the meetings of the Bureau, and it was by invitation. And after 1 or 2 meetings, I was not invited anymore, and the discussion was rather a one-way. Mr. Chang.
thank the deputations and individuals for coming today. Well, of the many public hearings, this is more rational. Oh, we've always been very rational. By that I mean it's not a venting session. We reason. But we find that some people are not reasonable. I feel that people are complaining that senior officials of education have an attitude that they are doing it as a favor, clemency. I heard that a student in the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts studied for just a few weeks and found that the facilities at the school cannot accommodate his need, so he had to quit. The academy is a more recent education institution. It's not like the Hong Kong U. When you take something away, it may be something that has been there for 100 years. A number of issues related to tertiary education institutions are identified. Today we deal with issues related to two groups of students, those with physical disability and those with visual impairment. Why would the situation end in students withdrawing after they have been admitted? It's not just about a low intake rate. Some students had to quit. So I'd like to ask the Education Bureau, how do you communicate with universities? You're not begging them, but you have to tell them that it has to be done. I understand that the Education Bureau can't give instructions to universities. But how can we ask them to be more accommodating? And when it comes to education, it's not just public education. You have to. For some people with a completely wrong idea, they have to be told that they are wrong. So what about communication and complaint? Well, there is a committee handling complaints and communication with representatives from parents. Or perhaps one can be set up with representatives from schools, parents, teachers, public, and they will meet once every 2 months, and they will handle all complaints, and in the process they will learn. I don't know whether there is this committee. I hope you will consider. Mr. Chan mentions about receiving all his textbooks 2 days before the exam. Well, I have said some good words about the school. Well, the school didn't have to give it to you, but because of maybe insufficient resources, it's taken them a very long time to prepare the material, and they're only available 2 days before the exam. Well, may I suggest that the Education Bureau set up a learning support fund with maybe $500 million or $1 billion. Students can make applications to get funding to give them learning support all the way from primary level to university level. so that they know that they can rely on the administration and they can rely on themselves. Mr. Young, 3 questions. Well, I also feel unhappy that someone has to quit. When the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts was mentioned, I do think that it is rather unacceptable. But when it comes to individual cases, we have to look into the case before we can draw a conclusion. In relation to a committee to handle communications and complaints, we receive different types of requests. We follow them up. I feel that this will be faster and more targeted. Of course, students who are in need, they can approach us, or they can approach district councillors or legislators. Sometimes we get cases referred to us by equal opportunities commissions, or cases when we're accused of maladministration. There are many different channels of complaint. You can approach us by phone or by mail directly. It would be better than going through a committee. In relation to the setting up of a fund, this is a rather new idea. I cannot comment on that. The most important thing is to make sure students in need will receive assistance and support. We'll consider Mr. Cheung's proposal. It's a rather complicated issue when it comes to administration. Mr. Kim Yun. Chairman, I thank deputations and individuals for coming, and I apologize because I was otherwise engaged, so I missed some of your speeches, but I can read your submissions. One of the focus is on tertiary education institution. I think the Education Bureau can give us information on behalf of the UGC. Well, how much is a different matter because the UGC is rather independent. I want to ask one thing. Is there any mechanism to deal with this? We're talking about students with physical disabilities and or visual impairments, and last time those with hearing impairment. Support and development support in this regard is better than other areas. Say, for example, those with emotional disorder. But there are still problems. Is there a standing mechanism to identify problems and deal with them? Especially when it comes to tertiary education. It's not directly under the purview of the Education Bureau. But what about under the UGC? Is there a dedicated mechanism or bodies, panel, committees that deals with it? What are the policies? We need a lot of resources. Mr. Peter Cheung mentions about some kind of fund. We also need to. We can also consider existing resources in universities. Say, for example, student volunteer. Perhaps some students require help from our fellow students to prepare notes. There are overseas experience. Well, if you want to graduate, you have to participate in social work, one of which is to help students in need to prepare notes. In this way, no additional resources or funding is required. And this is also the spirit of integrated education. So I'd like to ask, is there any kind of mechanisms under the UGC dealing with this issue? If there is a continuous process to identify and deal with problems, I believe that in the end we will be able to eliminate all problems. We've all along been communicating with tertiary education institutions about their operations. The tertiary education institutions and universities are reasonable. They are aware of their social responsibilities. When it comes to students with special needs, resources for SENs are included in the resources allocation. So there is sufficient resources for them to complete their studies. And individual institutions may have different ways to help them. Say, for example, just like what Mr. Ip said, student volunteers. We leave it to the education institutions to devise the best approach. In other words, there are resources available to them, but there is no mechanism. Under the UGC, is there a standing committee looking into such matters? One such mechanism will ensure that resources are used in the right way. From previous public hearings, it seems that we've heard about support that aren't too suitable or aren't too effective in helping students with special needs. And Ms. Mo wasn't happy that we've only started collecting information recently, but we will make use of the process to identify problems and areas for improvement. We'll work with them, discuss with them, and perhaps set standards. As far as I understand, there is no such mechanism under the UGC, but they've started collecting information. So the CHEUNG should discuss it. And as far as I understand, they've touched on this, but there is not much progress. There is no clear policy from the administration and the UGC requiring the institutions to do certain things. They have autonomy, so there are differences. I think the administration has the responsibility to require education institutions, especially subsidized ones, subvented institutions, to put in place a clear and standard policy. We will use a segment of our time to discuss issues specifically related to tertiary education institutions, so that students won't have any difficulties getting a place in the universities, and they will also receive suitable support. Ms. Helena Wong, I thank deputations for individuals for coming. I have a question. In the paper, in the submissions, I see that when it comes to visual aid, computers and support equipment, are they available at schools so that students with visual impairment don't have to actually lug the equipment all the way back into school?
Secondly, I want to know, when it comes to barrier-free access, is it the case that the schools have already put in place such facilities to provide a barrier-free environment for all students? So what's the latest progress? There's already a law requiring the schools to put in place such facilities. So I want to know, for the primary, secondary schools and universities, what are the current situation in terms of the provision of barrier-free access facilities? Let me take the second question first. For primary and secondary schools that built after 1997, they will meet the requirements for providing barrier-free access facilities. For those built before 1997, where necessary, where technically, where feasible, will retrofit lifts when there is an opportunity for large-scale renovation in the schools. But I don't think all these schools have such facilities. Before 1997, there were 227. And those built after, and we have altogether over 600 schools. I don't think all 600 schools have put in place such facilities. For some schools, maybe they can't introduce the facilities because of the environmental constraint. But if such schools enroll students with physical disabilities, will liaise with the schools to see if other means of assistance can be provided to the students. For example, having someone to help the students to climb the stairs. When it comes to students with visual impairment, when they are enrolled in the schools, we'll talk to the schools to identify the needs of the students. We have a top-up fund for the schools to make application so they can address the needs of the SVI. And if they've made the applications, then they should provide the facilities to the students. What about the figures of schools with and without the facilities, perhaps after the meeting? I think this is a serious problem. There is an ordinance to prevent discrimination against disabled people. It was passed before 1997. And education falls within the purview of the ordinance, meaning the students with disabilities should not be allowed to go on in a way that they can't move about freely. Now, some students may be allocated to schools without the relevant facilities, and you say that you can ask someone to help them. It means someone has to be there for the students all the time. This is a big problem. If a student with special needs is allocated to a school without the facilities, then the school should start the putting the facilities in immediately. Otherwise, the school should be held responsible under the relevant ordinance. So, Undersecretary, is there any time frame to address this issue? Let me talk about the principles first, and I'll defer to my colleagues. If a student with a special need is allocated to a school without the appropriate facilities that can meet his or her needs, say, for example, a student with physical disabilities is allocated to a school without barrier-free facilities, we will provide, we can give the student a place in a school that is more suitable for him. We, however, can't force him to opt out for the school he is allocated to. Rather, we will come up with other ways so that he can study in the school he is allocated to. And I'll defer to Ms. Wong to take up the other question. Please be succinct. Now, we have a top-up fund, which is to provide fund for construction of ramps and conversion of toilets. For large-scale renovation, for example, installation of lifts, we have to wait till the feasibility studies, and some schools may not have the environment to make such retrofitting. So in that case, there will be other means to help the students. For example, a wheelchair-bound student will be asked to go to another classroom to take the lesson. And there may be buddy programs for these students. So students will learn how to help their fellow students on campus. And when it comes to such programs, we haven't seen any problems encountered by the students. If member thinks we have to give support to the student in terms of school place allocation, we're happy to do so. I understand we have already got some of these examples already. It is very dissatisfactory. And in most cases, the student concerned will be asked to leave the school. And if the student insists, the bureau may say that there are supports for the student. Still, the school doesn't want the student to continue there. So, if most schools do not have BR facilities, this is really unacceptable. The bureau should take up the responsibility. There should be a plan for schools to put in place BR facilities for all our schools. Ms. Sit-ho, I want to thank the deputation for mentioning the Intellectual Property Ordinance. It may not fall within the purview of the Bureau. But when it comes to textbooks, teaching materials, and converting them into versions suitable for SVI, now in that case, the matter falls within the purview of your Bureau. So you cannot just pass the buck to other bureaus. You will have to work with the relevant bureaus so that there can be amendments to our own legislation. Moreover, there's already this agreement, international agreement, so you have to pick up your pace. Now, coming to public libraries, which is important for lifelong education. I understand there are computers, basic equipment in a public library already. And you have to ask the libraries to convert such materials to make them suitable for persons with VI. So the materials can be made available to everyone. Now, after we agree that students should be provided with education up to 18 years old. We also agree that there should be timely support and remedy to students with SEN. But we haven't conducted the relevant policy studies. There should be a sum given to academics every year to look at how other countries deal with this issue, and we should also see what's lacking of such facilities for integrated education in different schools. We haven't conducted such studies. Well, we need only say $50 million. Just give them the sum. They will be so thrilled to conduct the studies for you. And for the administration, you have to do the inventory to see what's lacking in the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And after the inventory, you have to allocate a sum for these schools to provide facilities for these students. Don't wait till members to start filibustering to ask you to do that. Now is the time for you to draft the budget for next year. In fact, this is the same case for every year. In the summer, you start doing that. And the plan first starts with the bureaus. So the EDB should ask for a certain amount for these from the FS. Scholarship should be provided to these students. They themselves have disabilities. They cannot study overseas to study how to address the needs of NEN, so they can come back and tell us their experience. So there should be a scholarship for them, and there should be exchange programs on addressing the needs of students with SEN, and you should also do the inventory. This is you need just a small sum for all these. I think we should have an agreement here. That is to ask the Policy Bureau to do their own calculation and fight for resources with the FS, so that in the budget of the next year, we will have resources to improve integrated education and education for students with SEN. Now, intellectual property ordinance and funding application, I really can't answer on the IP ordinance, but I can undertake that we'll talk to the CEDB and see what we can do in the next stage. As for scholarship, policy studies, inventory, we have heard your views. I can't undertake to do anything here, but I can tell you I'll consider that will be followed up. Matthew Cheung always says that things should be appropriate and help those in need. For people with physical disabilities and visual impairment, when it comes to PE lessons, home economics, science lessons, they are turned out from such lessons, or they are just asked to write an article, say for example, on football matches. Do you have any policy in relation to that? Now, these students enter mainstream schools on the one hand. On the other hand, you say that because of safety concern, these students are asked not to do something. But in fact, this is a kind of discrimination. There are chances of equal learning opportunities taken away. So is there any policy to bar schools from doing that? And if so, how can students and parents lodge their complaints if something like that happens to them? Under our policy, we don't have any policy saying that some people can't choose certain subjects. Under integrated education, we hope students with SEN will enjoy equal learning opportunities. Now, when it comes to campus life, the school may consider the different characteristics of the students, of individual students, and sometimes the schools are worried that maybe the students' performance may not be good, and that they are also worried that there may be safety issue. And that's why these are happening. It requires communication. If students have any of such cases saying that they can't take certain subjects, I'm very happy to look into that. If the school, if the principal sees that there may be certain problems if a student select a certain subject, the principal has the responsibility to tell this to the students.
I don't think they are told that they can't take physical education, but they're asked to just sit on one side, and they're just given replacement activities. Or perhaps in chemistry or physics, when they go to the laboratory, the student with physical disabilities or students with a visual impairment will have to sit on one side without being able to participate. They can take the subject, but they cannot participate in a lot of the activities. Say, for example, visits or even a walk for 1 million. They can't participate. A charity walk. So are there any policies telling schools that for general activities, schools should not exclude students with disabilities? If the school encounters difficulties, additional assistance should be given to schools to enable students to participate. Under the policy of integrated education, schools are aware that they need to provide sufficient support for students with special needs to enable them to receive the same learning experience and opportunities. And as to whether we specifically said that you can't do certain things, well, we wouldn't go that far. Ms. Wong? I'll share with you 2 examples that I've just encountered. In a primary school, there was a student with a physical disability. In the morning, when the whole school's doing the morning exercise, the student participated, of course, with some assistance and with the consent of the parents. And discussions was held as to what kind of exercise is suitable for that student. In a secondary school, the student participated in a exhibition. It's an art exhibition. It's a student with a visual impairment. Through the help of students, the information plaques are read out to the students, and they participate in activities like extracurricular activities or picnics. Just like the Undersecretary said, that if we need to follow up on certain cases, of course we will. I hope that all schools will be like the examples you've cited. There needs to be a complaint mechanism. It's difficult to approach you, to contact you. Well, it's the end of the scheduled time. I see that Ms. Helena Wong and Ms. Sid Ho would like to ask follow-up questions, so I will extend the meeting to 6:45. Can you just confine yourself to 3 minutes? Ms. Helena Wong. We'll talk about integrated education. We want to tell students with learning difficulties or disabilities that in the process of learning, they have equal opportunities. Their rights to learn will be taken care of. I was talking about barrier-free access. We have endorsed a number of discrimination ordinance, racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, and racial discrimination. They are all applicable in the education sector. In the past few years, the Equal Opportunities Commission disseminate guidelines in relation to employment, but there is none related to education. Is there one? There is one related to discrimination against disability. Well, then we urge schools to abide by the ordinance to ensure that students' rights will not be infringed upon and opportunities not deprived. We're talking about 130 students in primary schools and 250 in secondary schools. We're talking about over 300 students, maybe over 300 schools. Perhaps the Education Bureau will identify all these schools and tell us more about their existing facilities. They should be set out in the practice notes. And if it hasn't been done, how much time do they need? And also, the same goes for sexual discrimination. What about racial discrimination? The application of the law in the education sector. So whether it is the Equal Opportunities Commission or the Education Bureau, they should have a discussion with us. If they don't have the code, then they should be formulated and reviews should be done. Any one of the students or their families can take out litigations against you. Just a quick word. As far as I know, the Code of Education of the Equal Opportunities Commission covers discriminations in the education sector. We have also publicized to schools to abide by them. For school premises built after 1997, definitely they meet all the requirements. And for those built before that, improvement works will be done. So in relation to schools with students with physical disabilities, majority of them meet the requirements. I'd like to supply information to the Education Bureau. Well, for integrated education is for students with disabilities to learn about their able-bodied counterparts and the other way around. And I heard about the visit, someone reading out information in an exhibition. Well, there is actually the School for the Blind has a course training commentators or commentators to narrate movies or informations to them. Perhaps teachers will receive a similar education so that and students can participate in the training courses so that they can help students with disabilities, and they learn to interact with students with disabilities, and students with disabilities can learn to interact with their able-bodied counterparts. Every year, we have an annual seminar with the Hong Kong Society for the Blind. For students, there is something called other learning experience. This will be a very good learning experience for able-bodied students, because they will learn to appreciate their surroundings and then describe precise in a succinct way to students with a visual impairment. This is indeed a very good suggestion. Every year, we visit the schools, and we will liaise with them if they let us know that they have needs. Well, I participated in that activity of this society, Hong Kong Society for the Blind. But did you receive training? No, I did not. But I've watched the movies, and I listened to the narration without looking at the image. It's an entirely different experience. We should promote this. Maybe it's not under the purview of the Education Bureau, but perhaps for performing arts or movies, that they can be read out to people with visual impairment. Just now, someone mentioned about in special schools, students with physical disabilities encounter difficulties in this selection of subjects. When it comes to certain subjects, say for example applied learning, if they can be extended to these schools, and students with disabilities will have more choices. As you all know, there is only a limited number of subjects offered by special schools, so they need more help. It's almost time. We see that when it comes to tertiary education institutions, students with various types of disabilities experience of extremely low intake compared to able-bodied students. So we will set aside a special segment inviting the UGC, the 8 universities to talk to us. But there are some basic issues, say for example barrier-free books, electronic books, braille books. The Bureau said that 90% of them meet the target, but it's a different picture from the one painted by students, so I don't know what the actual situation is. But if at the beginning of the term the materials can be made available to students, they ask for legislative amendments related to copyright, and if it meets international requirements, I think that it will be all right. When it comes to learning support, Mr. Peter Cheung mentioned about some kind of fund. Ms. Sit-ho mentioned about resources made available for students and parents to apply for directly without going through schools. Some people mention about certain equipments that are only available at schools, and they don't have them at home. And this poses difficulties to them. And if there is a fund for direct application from students, then it will reduce conflict with schools. Please seriously consider these proposals. So in relation to today's issue, that is difficulties and needs for students with physical disabilities and visual impairments, we have come to an end. There will definitely be a comprehensive review. In the future, we will ask to speak to the Education Bureau again in relation to the comprehensive review.